Hello everyone. So I welcome you all to this module 12 of NPTEL course of UN SDGs. In this one we are going to discuss SDG 4, that is quality education. Okay, so let's see some facts. Globally, around 5.5 million more girls than boys of primary school age were out of school in 2018. Yeah. So if you see this, it's a data which suggests like girls are lagging behind, and there are a number of repercussions of education being affected of any child, whether it is a boy or a girl. Their entire life they are going to face some kind of impact because of the lack of proper education which they deserved at their right age. Well, why it matters? Let's see. So overall goal, ensure inclusive and quality education for all and promote lifelong learning. Inclusive, that's the key word, because the moment we see if girls are lagging behind with respect to boys, that's a kind of a imbalance which is going to get happen in the society over time. One side is getting heavier, one side is getting lighter, and that's an imbalance. Second thing comes about quality education. Well, education we all know. What is this quality word in doing in here, right? So that's another like a point of focus to understand what this quality word actually means in this context. We will see during the course of like this lecture what does it mean, and it talks about here further promote lifelong learning. Well, it's very philosophical, it's very kind of profound, which doesn't talks about only education mean for livelihood, right? Or maybe like learning some skills only, right? It talks about a whole life, like how one can nourish, with this educational like inputs, educational nutrient, if we call it, and for their whole life, right? So that is the objective over here, which is much larger than just like schooling, right? Because schooling ends the moment you graduate from your school, but lifelong learning doesn't end with the school, right? It continues with your entire life, no matter where you are. Why does education matter actually? Why do we kind of like put in so much emphasis, and right after I think food and poverty and health, why immediately there is like education? Because the moment the first three things are taken care of, you have a respectable income where you can fend for your like your family, yourself, you can gather enough like at least mandated like necessities, fulfill your necessities. Then you can take care of properly of your own body, physical and mental well-being, and then immediately there is education. Okay, because education empowers you for the whole life. We are in such an era now where education is so much integral with our everyday life and every hour's life, So it's not that we are living in the Middle Ages or maybe in the ancient times where it doesn't matter whether one is able to learn anything or not, because a lot of things were actually physical abilities based. Now along with physical, mental abilities have taken like a supreme like a position, right? So if you are mentally able, you can do a number of things, okay, because there are a number of things available to assist you on the physical requirements. Like it is not necessary to carry like a like a weight at the top of your head, right? You can do it by other several means also, right? But mental abilities have found a very supreme place, and that's how this whole like a human endeavors and things are actually getting sustained, right? So education is so important that it plays like a vital role in everyone's life. Well, why it matters, let's see. Education enables upward socio-economic mobility. You see, these words actually mean quite a lot. It talks about socio-economic mobility in upward direction, improvement, right? betterment, from what you have today, tomorrow you should be in a better position, right? Socio-economic mobility, that it puts you, at the higher, like a position, higher level, and it gives you an improvement, right? And a key to escaping poverty. Yeah. So if you see how one can get rid of poverty is, of course, by going for some like a works, so that you can live, you can earn your livelihood, right? That work can be for yourself, like if you want to be an entrepreneur, businessman, or something like that, or maybe even a farmer, right? So you do your own work, you grow your own like the like crops and things, and yeah, or you go for like working for somebody else, like services, right? And then you earn your livelihood, right? So it's a very easy and everyday regular like a basis of improving someone's economic like a situations. That's why like this phrase is beautifully like a framed like a words and terms. It talks about socio-economic, so not just economics. If you see, socio word is also there. Like humans, we as a kind of a group, we are social animals, right? We like living in groups, we are not a solitary creature, right? So there is a lot dependent on each other, like our families being the like a first like immediate unit, which we are like probably all are like a part of. We are given birth by like our parents, right? Then we have our siblings, our spouse, our kids, right? Grandparents, both sides, maternal, paternal, right? And other members also in the family, right? So it's a small like a one like a world for yourself, for all of us, right? And then there are our other relatives, friends, peers, neighborhoods, right? Our like a work peers, our like other like a friends, and like in the whole society, right? So there are so much of like interdependence. If you are strong enough, you can be a support system for all your family like members, isn't it true? If you are strong enough, you can be a support member for your other family members and relatives and friends also. If you are strong enough, you can be a supporting like a member for your entire society. For example, if you are an entrepreneur, you are able to employ like 5,000, 10,000 people with you. Of course, you are the like a support giver for those 5,000, 10,000 people, right? And their respective families. So how the number actually multiplies, who are directly getting like benefited from you because of your skills and abilities, mainly mental abilities, because you should be able to think at that level and assemble those resources and things and bring it and make it such a mechanism which functions to enable like this kind of environment, right? So that is the situation which helps connecting socio and economic conditions. So this is where these two terms come together. I hope I'm able to explain it to you. Let me move forward. Education helps reduce inequalities and reach gender equality, and is crucial to fostering tolerance and more peaceful societies. So education, well, education is about like educating ourselves about something, right? What that something could be? That something could be about like a basic sciences, like like a physics, chemistry, maths, like 1 plus 1 2, 2 plus 2 4, and like a science and like languages, if you see, and then other things. Then comes like other specialized things, like if you want to study history, geography, and like economics, and civics, public administration, all of those. Then in the science side, if you want to study physics, chemistry, math, biology, right, etc. Then you want to move to engineering, mechanical, electrical, then technology, like computer science, like and design fields, liberal arts, like medicine, management. There are a lot of things, right? Nowadays, like even new things such as artificial intelligence, climate change, history, like heritage, all of these are also evolving into their unique like subject fields. Okay, so there is this generalized set of like like a things which one like must study to make themselves aware of, like what is this universe, what is the sun, what is our planet Earth, what is oxygen, how we are living, what are the living conditions, what is ozone layer, all of the XYZ. And then there are some specialized fields. For example, I specialize in architecture and design, so I have mastery in these two subjects, right? So I can handle like a topics from this area. I can like go for like educating like like a people I can go for research into like this area, right? I can do like experiments, simulations, and conduct like a consultancy projects and things like that. So that becomes a like a generalized subjects are like your horizon. Okay, specialized subjects are like like a vertical this thing, right? So you can go higher, you can go like a deeper, right? And you can specialized into like a certain like a like subject area, like for example medicine and all, right? Which will help you like strengthen your capabilities to go deeper into certain thing, right? One specialized pinpointed thing, right, where your contribution can be much higher, right? And this horizon is able to give you like a broader perspective and information about other things. But even if I am not trained into like for example statistics and economics, okay, one must know like a basic nuances of it, because in the today's life knowing things is essential for your own understanding first of all. And if you are knowledgeable enough, definitely you will be able to understand what are the things going on in your surrounding, right? You can educate yourself to first of all be aware of it, make benefits out of it, utilize them into like like a better ways, and like multiple possible ways and things like that. Because every day there are some new rules, regulations, bills and things, like how the parliament and legislative assemblies actually function. Okay, if you are not aware of them, how are you able to like take any benefit out of like such schemes which governments are launching every day, right? So education helps you in variety of ways. Rather, education empowers you for each and everything what you can do, and those potentials are really limitless, right? So that is the work of education. Then it talks about reducing inequalities, because if you are aware what this whole problem is and why it should not be actually carried forward in the future, okay, you will must like work towards like abolishing or harboring first of all your own like any like from the older times, any like such notions and things like that. If you see something happening with somebody, maybe you should like intervene and stop it, right? And all of those things, and slowly and gradually our society will move towards much refined and finer like a like a phase, right? And then gender equality, of course, with time it has been proven that like there is no like a difference as far as capabilities are concerned. There is no difference between these two genders. Well, biological things are like a different like a matter to like understand. Okay, so keeping them aside, like anybody's like abilities of performing something or learning something or doing something, there is no difference. There is no difference between any poor or rich person's abilities. There is no difference between like a gender based like distinctions or any any such way, right? An engineer's son also can become an engineer, and somebody else's son also can become like an engineer, and so on. Like it's not just to like a favor one like a profession or something. Everybody carries the same potential. Fortunately, God has like gifted us with the same or equal like a brain like a powers, right? So there is no distinction at like that thing. Everybody is at equal. So that should translate in our everyday life, in our society as well. Well, if we take examples from the ancient India, okay, there has been several like scholarly women which are even like idols for us. Why not to bring back like that like a time, even in today's time across the world, okay, not just one place. If you see, there are like some countries where women are like still do not possess like voting rights, or they are not treated as equal. They cannot actually walk and roam around like freely and all of those things. Those things are actually still very medieval and like depressing, right? So just because like a person is having like that particular gender, they lose their freedom, right? That's not right. So those kind of things at minute level or at bigger level, at every level, should be addressed. Yeah, and why is it needed? For fostering tolerance and more peaceful societies. Because where there are like laughing and happy like people, that society, you can say, is a happy and satisfied society. You can say like it's a kind of like a good like a place to be. For example, if you see like Bhutan, for example, they do not assess like GDP in terms of economics or monetary gains. They assess like their like gains like GDP in the terms of like a gross happiness index or something like that, right? So that's a very like amazing way of like understanding and bringing everything together. Because if each and every person is happy, That's what we are all striving for, isn't it? It doesn't matter I have like X rupees or maybe 1 million X rupees or something like that. Okay, it doesn't make any difference, because at the end of the time, all of the money whatever we have is going to get remain here only. At the end of your life stage, were you happy, were you satisfied for what you did in your whole life? Is a kind of self introspection which helps you figure out what was really needed to be done from your life, right? So a good, healthy and happy society gets like a birth from the foundations of education. That's why it is essential. Let me take you forward. Over the past decade, major progress has been made towards increasing access to education and school enrollment rates at all levels, particularly for girls. Nevertheless, about 258 million children and youth were still out of school in 2018. That's a big figure, right? Nearly 1/5 of the global population in that age group. By God, like, so X by fifth of that age group couldn't be in the school. Okay, it's not just like a few numbers we are talking about. That entire age groups, 1/5, 20% couldn't go there. See how big how like a big like this number is in that magnitude, like how far we are, right, from the target. And yeah, again the COVID's like impact. As the COVID-19 pandemic spread across the globe, countries announced the temporary closure of schools. That was the most impacting one, and immediately everything was closed, impacting more than 91% of students worldwide. By April 2020, close to 1.6 billion children and youth were out of school. Most unfortunate, the biggest like a dip, COVID-19. Well, fortunately, I see it as an unfortunate this thing only in the unfortunate incidents of this pandemic, that India had like connection of 4G like by that time, and people were aware of like e-transactions, right? Buying, purchasing and transfer money, even like 1 rupee, 5 rupee, 10 rupee transaction, and to buy a cup of tea or things like that. Okay, these two like things, with the help of like a smartphones, India was majorly able to cope up with the impacts of COVID-19 in a much greater way. Well, that's definitely a time of like a depression, but still we were able to cope up because we were like accustomed to these like a few things by that time. Okay, remember, immediately schools were closed, offices were closed, markets were closed, productions were kind of halted or majorly disrupted, right, if not completely closed, right? And aviation was completely shut down, trains were shut for the whole, when the first time in the whole history of like for example this whole lineage. Okay, such kind of like a full stop actually came into the being. But immediately, if not everybody, majority of the section of the society moved to the digital platforms, and schools actually opened in just like a few months time, digitally, like in online mode, right? And at least the satisfaction is kids, students, school and in school, they were not able to like miss the sessions, right? So well, it was kind of a little like lagged, or kind of it went behind in time, but it wasn't disrupted. The session wasn't closed, the session was not void, right? So that's the biggest like a satisfaction, that even if like there was some impact, but it did not come to a close. Okay, so well, we have learned how to kind of like a bounce back. That's like a resilience, like a capacity we were like discussing in the previous lectures, right? But yes, that like impact is still like a very big. If you see, 1.6 billion children and youth were out of school because of that like an impact. So on this front, how much progress we have made so far? So primary school completion rate reached 84% in 2018. 84%, that's good. 84%, up from 70% in year 2000. So earlier in year 2000 it was 70%, and this was 2018, and then is expected to reach 89% globally by 2030. So 2030 is going to be 89%. So still there is kind of, like 11%, even after this. Well, we are still here, like 2022, 23, right? So this percentage, might be little lesser than, like this, somewhere here between 84 to 89, right? But yeah, so there is still, like a 15, 16, 17, or maybe, like some like 14, 13, 20, or 12, percentage of, target remaining to be achieved, right? In 74 countries with comparable data for the period 2011 to 19, around 7 in 10 children aged 3 and 4 were developmentally on the track in at least 3 of the following domains: literacy, numeracy, physical development, social emotional development, and learning. Okay, so you see, like education has, like several components, like, and this whole human development, human resource development has multiple components. You can see them here. And how these agencies are actually caring so much to go behind all of those like domains equally, right? They are all important. The global adult literacy rate aged 15 years and older was 86% in 2018, while the youth literacy rate 15 to 24 was at 92%, which is good, right? But yeah, this should go to 100%. Well, then what challenges remain? We are seeing these numbers are still like behind like 100% ka goal. Despite years of steady growth in enrollment rates, non-proficiency rates remain disturbingly high. In 2018, some 773 million adults, two-thirds of whom are women, remain illiterate in terms of reading and writing skills. Literacy and education are, I think literacy you can say is the level 1. Okay, so literacy means, the person is able to read and write. That's a very basic, like abilities, that you are able to read a newspaper, maybe a piece of notice, or something, or maybe a letter, and you are able to write, few things, maybe a small, like a passage, maybe a letter, or maybe an official, like application or something like that, so that, in case it is needed in your own, like everyday life, you should not, like depend on someone else that you please write this application for me and things like that. So that's a very basic level of, like a reading and writing abilities. We call it as literacy. We name it as like a literacy. So if you see these numbers, in 2018, some 773 million adults, like grown-ups we are talking about, above 15 years of age and elderly, and of which two-thirds were women. That's where again, this kind of a discouraging, like information that of all illiterate, like a people, two-thirds are women. Well, it's good that men have like a forefront, but women also should not lag behind, right? So this should be like equal. They also, so it suggests if you are a kind of an implementer or a policy maker, or maybe if you are executing some scheme or something, then where to work more, definitely for the like women's like a literacy improvement, right? So that this number comes to an improvement like a stage. Okay, so the sheer magnitude of school closures due to COVID-19 is likely to set back progress on access to education. Of course, years of like effort is going to get like some hit. Where are people struggling the most to have access to education? Those regions. The first comes Sub-Saharan Africa, faces the biggest challenges in providing schools with basic resources. The situation is extreme at the primary and lower secondary levels, where less than half of schools in Sub-Saharan Africa have access to drinking water, electricity, computers, and internet. Because in today's time, even if there is like well, forget about internet and computer, there is no water supply. It's such an unimaginable kind of situation. Are we living in the like middle ages or dark ages, or I don't know what, so it's so much of like a lagging behind, right? We are talking about creating smart classrooms and things like that, with majorly equipped with the like computing abilities and presentation like abilities, and like internet, right? And lots of like physical books, and even like digital like knowledge resources, books, and other stuff, journals, papers, etc., etc. And there are some schools where even basic things like water is also not available, perhaps toilets also not available, right? In India also there were like like a few years back, in a few decades back, this situation was there in several villages and like a remote like a places. Toilet facilities were not like there in the schools, and indirectly this situation actually led to the girl student like withdrawing from the schooling. Okay, well, they didn't came and complain to the school administration because it's a matter of little like a maybe getting shy also naturally. Like if you are in the age of like a early age, right, and if you are from a village background, you may not be like in general very outspoken and upfront about things, right? So they did not even speak and protested anything. They just like did not like join the school. They did not came, and that became for several years an issue. Why girl students did not go to school? Because boys can relieve here and there, but girl students cannot do, right? And this actually situation was actually found out, and a lot of agencies, NGOs, government institutions, and even other like a lot of philanthropists, right? I am also personally like aware of one philanthropist who has worked in the like a state of Telangana and many other places like Uttar Pradesh, and they actually like worked for creating workable toilet like a facilities in the schools, which again attracted like children, particularly girl like a children, right? And yeah, midday meal scheme, if you are aware of like even this thing, I'm sure that will also like come in the coming like slides, that some families out of poverty, if they are not able to fend for themselves, even a small kid of maybe 5-10 years old, they will see it as maybe like an earner, right? Even if the kid is able to earn for himself or herself, instead of school, they will like to send him or her to maybe like a place where he or she can like a work and earn even like a 5-10 rupees, 20 rupees a day. That is good enough for them. That is the like a situation like we are talking about. So midday meal like a scheme was implemented to attract like a kids, so that with a promise that your lunch, a wholesome nutritious lunch, is taken care of. And presently you may be aware of pan India, almost pan India, there is like this NGO Akshay Patra, they are providing these midday meals like schemes. I think it runs the, I think the quantity runs in several like a millions like a per day like a per like a plates, million plates per day, something. Well, statistics I'm not aware of, maybe you can check separately. Okay, but yes, this is actually these kind of schemes of like a creating toilet facilities and creating like these lunch cup facilities and things have increased the number of registration and continuation in the schools, which is definitely going to help in the like coming decades and the century, because more and more students will be educated, and they will kind of grow into a full educated person in their like a youth and their rest of their like a age, and that is going to definitely help like our country, right? So these are the basic things sometimes we ignore, but they are essential for ensuring education in the country, right? Okay. Inequalities will also worsen unless the digital divide, the gap between underconnected and highly digitalized countries, is not addressed. So some countries are like a moving much faster, some countries are lagging behind, like we saw sub-Saharan Africa. So how this gap can be bridged, how the distribution of resources can take place equally justified at all places, right? That is the challenge. Are there groups that have more difficult access to education? Yes. Well, what are those groups? Of course, the first one we saw from the slide 1, women, like a girl, like a child, right? Women and girls are one of those groups. About 1/3 of countries in the developing regions have not achieved gender parity in primary education. These disadvantages in education also translate into lack of access to skills and limited opportunities in the labor market for young women. What can be done? Ask our governments to place education as a priority in both policy and practice. Make a check with your local representative. make sure that there are like enough resources and things. First of all, gather data whether it is happening. If not, then go behind them and yeah, try establishing such like a educational like a schooling facilities and like a college like a things, right? Lobby our governments to make firm commitments to provide free primary education. There should not be any charge, like we know, like we are still fighting poverty, right? And in such a situation, how the family who is living almost close to the like a poverty level like that line, they will be paying for the like a fee, right? So basic education, primary education, or rather the entire education system, I suppose there are several countries which have like this model, even till like a PhD and like a beyond, education is always free. If it is education, it's free. Okay, I think India, I personally vouch for this thing, because only in this kind of scenario we can empower our young generation to be a very strong and like a like a enabled like a country in the times to come, because we are like going to face a lot of challenges in the future, right? In the next century there are several like countries which are developing at much faster rate than us. We have to also cope, right? We have to bring back like that golden like era of our country back again, and that can only be done by the first and only mean of education. Rest things will definitely follow, right? So education at all level, not just primary to without even thinking must be free for everyone, including vulnerable or marginalized group, any group, blanket like a policy that everybody will get like a free education, at least at primary level. Well, for more details, this link, yeah, let's see some more number. Before COVID, progress towards inclusive and equitable quality education was too slow. Over 200 million children will still be out of school in 2030. Inequalities in education are exacerbated by COVID-19. In low-income country, children's school completion rate is 79% in richest ones, 20% of households, 34% in poorest 20% of households. So you can see, like this huge, like gap that happening between, like rich and, like a poor countries, right? So this is the, like a gap we want to, like a bridge, right? And how can this be done? I think India is also one of the countries where, number of kids who are, like away from school is much higher, right? We have to, work towards this to improve it. Well, COVID-19 implications. School closures kept 90% of all students out of school, reversing years of progress in education. Remote learning remains out of reach for at least 500 million students. Remote learning means, these are online facilities, internet, like computing devices, whether a smartphone or a computer, or maybe a tablet or something like that. Okay, some digital device and internet. Only 65% of primary schools have basic hand washing facilities. You see this number, I was talking about, hand washing. Only 65%, close to 2/3. 1/3, still remains critical for COVID-19 prevention. So if this is not there, like a spread of, like a such, like a viruses will be higher, because this takes care of personal hygiene, right? So yeah, quality education.